Hi. Again, I just got back from a conference down in Colombia that involved the counselors and auxiliary board members from all over Central and South America. And there were several concepts that were mentioned while we were down there that I thought were really interesting. There's another set of videos that talks about the whole thing of study circles and doing the practices and how that's important. But another thing that kind of struck me was a kind of in-depth conversation that I had with one of the international counselors there about this whole concept of increasing intensity. If you look in the December 28th message from 2010 from the World Center and look on page 4, you'll notice that it talks about increasing intensity. It starts on page 3, but then it goes to page 4 and it has this one paragraph that talks about 3 aspects of this increasing intensity. So when it was first mentioned, this idea of increasing intensity, I thought that's one of the things we need to know. If we're going to have clusters, we're going to need to start the process off in the clusters and go to milestone 1, but after that we really want to increase the intensity. We want to do things bigger and better so that we can continue on and move to milestone 2. So what is this increasing intensity all about? And if you look at that particular message on page 4, what it talks about is increasing intensity being seen in 3 different ways: unfolding processes, emerging structures, and enduring fellowship. And so when I first read that, I kind of read over it and it really didn't stick in my mind. But when I talked to the counselor about it, he kind of brought new life to these things. And so I just wanted to share some of the things that he mentioned. First of all, the idea is when we talk about these unfolding processes, one of the things we're looking at is the different processes in the cluster and institute process that makes this whole process work overall. One of those processes is advancing people through the series of different services that we do. So you look at someone being, let's say, a child starting off in children's classes, they're going over the junior youth groups, they go through and start study circles, then they start doing service of their own. Do we have that process down? Are we really working that process well? When someone's a child and about to get to the junior youth group age, is there conversations between the children's class teachers and the junior youth teachers to make sure that transition is smooth? The same thing between these transitions as well. Is everybody in the cluster communicating with each other to make sure everybody knows what's going on? Also, the process of developing resources. So for example, if we have a youth in the community, do we have a process in place where that youth can then become trained and accompanied and taken care of so they can become a children's class teacher, and then they can go on to begin to accompany others in this particular area, and then they can eventually become a coordinator or assistant in some regard? Do we have that process down and in place? Another important process, of course, is the 3-month cycle. Do we understand what those 3-month cycles are all about? Are we doing the expansion and consolidation and everything else that we're supposed to be doing? And do we have it in the regular 3-month period? So that kind of looks at some of the processes there, but really what we're talking about when we talk about unfolding processes is that when we go from milestone 1, where a lot of people are doing things on an individual basis, and move on to milestone 2, are we having all those processes in place that really make this whole cluster and institute process go forward fast? Are they down, solid, and working well? The next thing is to talk about the structure. And again, the structure of the cluster is there's multiple aspects of it, but one aspect of it is development of the cluster agencies, the auxiliary board member and the assistants working with the cluster institute coordinators, working with the area teaching committee. Are we seeing that structure be put into place? Do we have individuals that are really good at accompanying people? And then those individuals are put into as cluster institute coordinators. And then those individuals move from one cluster institute coordinator to multiple ones, where there's an institute coordinator for each line of service, for study circles, for children's classes, for junior youth. Is that structure moving forward and getting stronger and stronger and stronger? In terms of teaching, the same thing applies. In the beginning, we had people teaching alone primarily. Are people moving from teaching alone to doing it on a collective basis, to eventually picking out some of those people who are really good at this type of stuff and then moving on to area teaching committees? Is that structure getting stronger, more defined? Are we beginning to find people to take on those different roles? That's what we're talking about in terms of emerging structures. And then in terms of fellowship, one of the things that's supposed to come out of this whole cluster and institute process is there's supposed to be enduring fellowships. If you have a study circle, the relationships that are developed during that study circle are supposed to go on beyond the study circle and hopefully into past the service where people are continuing to work on together. Is that what we see happening? When people are working together, do we see an increase of love and fellowship in the community to be an indication that things are going in a good direction? When we spend time with our fellow believers in those communities, do we feel our hearts lightened? Do we feel happier? Or, are we kind of apprehensive? And, to a certain degree, the way the writings describe it, it's almost like a thirsty person finding water. All of us know the experience of being really thirsty and all of a sudden feeling that nice cold drink going down the throat. Is that the way we feel when we go and see our fellow believers, where we're just feeling, oh gosh, I'm so glad I'm with these people? So the idea here is that we can look at these as indicators of whether we have increasing intensity in our clusters as things move forward up to milestone 1 and on to milestone 2. And we can look at it at all kinds of different levels. We can look at it at the individual level, we can look at it at the neighborhood level, the sector level, and the whole wide cluster level. We can apply these standards, the processes, the emerging structures, and enduring fellowship at each of those different levels to see whether things are moving in the direction we want. And if we do see advancement in these areas, then it must mean that we're seeing increasing intensity and we're doing what we need to do to eventually move to milestone 2 and have intensive programs of growth. That's about it. Thanks.